Okay, friends, this is where we were. If you want to go in your textbook into chapter 19, we spent a good amount of time yesterday talking about the female anatomy. We will finish that up today. We'll complete the female reproductive cycle. We talked a little bit about that again yesterday. So where we were yesterday, here's one of your diagrams, of course, you'll need to know for your test that will come on Tuesday. For your test that will come on Tuesday. We will keep going. I won't be here on Friday, potentially not on Monday. So if I'm not going to be here, then there's things that we'll do. No, Tuesday's your test. Tuesday's a test for sure. Sorry? I just don't like you guys. I want to go away. No. Friday is a vacation. Monday may be a working day. We'll see. Yes. So you know this diagram. You've seen this. Any questions here? Again, this is just one of those diagrams I do want you to know. From the front, basically if you're working from anterior, posterior, you have that mons pubis, though it's not labeled. And again, that's kind of that adipose tissue on top of the pubic symphysis. You have the clitoris, which we'll talk more about today. You have the two labia, the majorum or the majus and the minus, large and small, right? Outer and inner, two separate folds. You have the urethra, which is anterior, or superior, I guess would maybe a better word for it, anterior to the vagina, then the vagina, and then the anus. The vagina goes up, leads to the cervix, which is the bottom part of the uterus. From the uterus come those uterine tubes with the fimbriae on the ends and the infundibulum, the funnel on the top, and then the ovaries. And of course in the back, the rectum, large intestines. We rolled through here, same picture, but just anterior view instead of that stupid sagittal slice. We talked about the different glands that are present, that there is a female prostate gland, there is a female bulbourethral gland. And remember the point of those guys were for what? Lubrication. Right? This is lubricating the outside. The vestibule is what they call that outermost genitalia area. We talked about the hymen, the fact that does not tell you whether or not you have had sex or not, because maybe you never had it, right? And it is affected by many other things than simply just intercourse. We talked about how you started as the same. Whether you're male or female, our genitals started the same, and then differentiated. This is about 10 weeks into the development, where they look still pretty similar, right? This middle picture. But you're starting to see some differences happen. And then certainly by the end, you get those significant differences. And if there's something that goes wrong in that developmental stages, then that could be where some of the transgender issues come up, because it's a, male genitalia or female. Well, what if you have a little bit of both, right? And again, we're talking about the actual anatomy, not necessarily just orientation. There's some differences between those two things. Y'all with me on the differences? Orientation meaning I like men or I like women, or I like both. These are different from the actual anatomy pieces. Yeah. You do not. Nope. Just what's on your sheet. Just what's on your sheet. This is one of the diagrams you do have to know. This is that anterior view of basically the uterus and the uterine tubes and ovaries. You see the layers of the uterus, right? The endometrium being the inmost, the myometrium, the muscle area, the perimetrium being the outermost layer. That endometrium is what builds up and sloughs off during the menstrual cycle. We'll talk more about that again today. We talked about the cervix. And again, that's simply just that bottom part of the, the uterus, you could think of it like the doorway. You know what I mean? It's basically holding that uterus closed most of the time. There's a little bit of an opening there, but then when childbirth is occurring, that has to significantly stretch. That's what the contractions do. They are literally stretching that out to allow you to have the babies. Okay, so now into our new pieces for the day. Forgive me as I take attendance really quickly here. This is the clitoris. Maybe you've never seen this picture before. So can you see these light lines underneath here, right? This is the external anatomy. You see what I'm speaking of? But then around the colored portion, that is the rest of the clitoris. It's not simply just this little piece on top, the little glands, the little head, just like the glands of the penis. It literally surrounds the vagina as it moves up. And remember, when we went through the stages, right? That the clitoral tissue is basically the female penis. It's different, right? It's different. It's not the same. It's not nearly as large. It's much smaller. But is it significantly infused with nerve fibers? Yes. More, truthfully, than the guy's penis has. So a very sensitive spot, highly pleasurable throughout. You see corpus cavernosum? Do you remember that? From the penis, right? Same thing. So this does fill with blood, and you get a female erection just like a male has an erection. Much less obvious, obviously, because it's a much smaller organ, but it does happen. And so this is why there are, again, tons of nerve endings inside the vagina and inside, with this clitoris that's all the way around that vagina. So again, this is what's giving the pleasure, what's giving the good feelings to having the intercourse. Did you all know that was like that? I never knew that until I started teaching this. Yeah, even with all the classes I had taken up until this point. It's fairly new research that they're doing that's looking at these kind of things. Questions there? Okay. Our next piece is where we're getting into that oogenesis. So they're showing you again a primary oocyte breaks down so that you will have 23 chromosomes. Remember the same thing. What is oogenesis? How many chromosomes does an ovum end up with? It's the same thing for the males, right? The sperm has 23 chromosomes. The egg has 23 chromosomes. And the two of them get together to make your lovely cells, which have 46. And again, you don't have to know the process. You don't have to know all these pieces. What is oogenesis? Producing the eggs. And how many chromosomes does it have? This picture is kind of showing you the timeline of how... Is Kaina not here today? She's here somewhere. That's all I'm missing, right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Right? That's it, right? And Brenda, who's gone, right? I got Brenda there. Good. All right, good. This is showing you that oogenesis cycle. And this is basically what's happening on a monthly basis. Okay? That the egg is maturing. And how it does this is based upon hormones. Hormones are telling it that, okay, it's time for you to mature. Because remember, you begin your life with all the eggs you're ever going to have. Okay, whereas the guys are producing the sperm, repeatedly over and over and over throughout the course of their life. You have the eggs. Now, they're these primordial follicles, right? They're like, what's the word I want? Immature. They're like unhatched. We have to grow them like the seeds of the eggs. But they're still the eggs. And then through these hormones, they mature. They become these primary oocytes. And eventually here is ovulation, where that egg is released. And again, that happens about halfway through the menstrual cycle, about the 14th day of the menstrual cycle. And then the shell, basically, that the egg was in goes through this other process of shrinking back up. And what it does is it's producing hormones. And your textbook goes very nicely through all that are produced. You don't have to know all of those pieces. But the hormones that are produced here are what help control the menstrual cycle. Because you can see, here is our ovulation right here at day 14, right? Do you see the hormones that are peaking? Big peak in estrogen, right, the red one. Big peak in the luteinizing hormone and the follicle-stimulating hormone. These are the hormones that are telling that egg to mature. And then eventually, okay, you're good. Let's release. For my master's thesis at Andrews when I was in PT school, what we found is that there are the anterior cruciate ligament, the ACL, in the knee. They found that there are receptors for estrogen on this ligament. And that when estrogen is bonded to them, it kind of changes the structure of the ligament, makes it a little bit weaker. There's a high incidence of female athletes who tear their ACLs more often than guys do. And the question that we asked for our research was, well, is that because of these receptor sites? Does that make this ligament weaker? So therefore, during ovulation, when there's this huge jump in estrogen right before it, they would be at a greater risk of knee injury, right? So there's this machine that we have that tests the laxity of how loose the ligament is. And so we tested. We had this group of, how many did we get? Like 50 ladies? That they used urine tests, these urine dipstick tests that measure the amount of estrogen in the urine. Why would people want to measure the amount of estrogen in their urine? Anyone have any ideas? To figure out whether their cycle, why do we care about that? To see if they could get pregnant or not, and not actually to see if they are pregnant or not. That's a different hormone for a pregnancy test. But this would be the time, so you see that this peak happens right, I don't know what in the world that was for. What? I don't really know what to do with that. Why? Well, oh, BKB? Let's do this. Let's try that. Try this. Wow. Oh, BKB. So you see that peak. We'll just roll with it, I guess. You see the peak of estrogen happens right before what? Ovulation, right? So if I'm trying, well, I couldn't get pregnant, but if my wife is trying to get pregnant, if we see with this test that ovulation, that big spike of estrogen has happened, that's when you want to have intercourse, right? Because these are the best chance of getting pregnant, right? So we use these urine tests, and we measured the laxity of these ladies' knees before ovulation, during ovulation, after ovulation, for a couple of months worth of cycles. We didn't find that everybody across the board had more chance of that knee being looser during ovulation, but there were certain ladies that significant differences in how loose their knee was, which just makes sense. That would mean they'd be more likely to, their knee would be less stable and have more chance of getting injured. If you desire, I have the thesis in my office. You ever want some light reading that you want to do, during study hall someday, come check it out. I'm glad to show it to you. Myself and my partner, Suzanne. Suzanne Kemperly was my partner. Any questions here? What I wanted you to see with this cycle, because if you looked on your sheet, this diagram is something I want you to understand. This is on page 524. There's also a table on page 523 that talk about the different pieces of the cycle. I want you just to be able to describe what's happening here. So, What is happening here? It's like ovulation cycle, so a gradual increase in estrogen that peaks right about day 14. You also have this increases in luteinizing hormone, that's LH, and follicle stimulating hormone, that's FSH. That again, both of those peak right about day 14, right about that ovulation time, right? Notice what's happening to the green here. The green is progesterone, right? You see how there's this curve that gets bigger and bigger and bigger? Do you see how that mirrors the lining of the endometrium? Gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the more progesterone you have, the more that inner layer, that endometrium, is getting thicker so that it's ready. If the egg is fertilized, it can implant in that uterus. Sir?
So does that mean that there's no egg in the uterus for 14 days? Right, certainly. There's all the way up until here, there is no egg that's being produced. So you can't get pregnant?
No. But the point is, you don't know for sure when that happens. It's not like it's every month exactly the same day. And then there's the time frame from when it's produced until it actually exits the body. And how many days is that? It depends. You know. So again, this is what's called the rhythm method of birth control, that I keep very close track of my periods. Some people can tell when they are ovulating. They feel some different pains or feelings or just basically by the hormone levels. And you would not have sex during that time if you didn't want to get pregnant. But it ends up being, maybe a 7 or 10 day span, before ovulation and right afterwards. I mean, it's a good long break. And again, it varies month to month, so it's not very effective. Not a very effective way of preventing you from getting pregnant. Are you with me, my friends? I am not expecting you to memorize this diagram. I just want the big things. Can you give me a big rundown of what's happening hormone-wise, what's happening to the follicle, the eggs, and what's happening at the endometrium? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I don't think that does affect that. When it's talking about follicles, it's literally talking about these. That's what they're called the follicles, yeah. I don't think it affects the hair now. At least not that I'm aware of.
Spelled the same way as follicle?
It is, yeah, it is. But that's literally what they're calling these eggs. It's an egg follicle. And then the ovum, the egg is inside that's released. And then that follicle then changes shape to become these other pieces. Yes, ma'am?
You know how sometimes for girls, they can like their weight or like their health, it can make their flow like thicker.
Sure.
And less. So does that have to do with their progesterone as well? Or?
That's a great question. I don't know. I know there is a wide variety of lengths of flow, heaviness of flow, in different women, but what causes it, I don't know. It very well could be. I mean, that certainly with this diagram lends the two of those things together. Yeah, but I don't know. It's a great question. Athletes, very, very thin ladies, they can develop what's called amenorrhea, meaning you do not have a menstrual cycle, which is not a good thing. It's not something that you're trying to get, but it's basically that the body is either so focused on healing itself and training if you're an elite level athlete, or perhaps there's not enough nutrition to actually produce the hormones and go through these processes. So that's something the doctor will always ask when you see. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. There are months that you miss, and it's not like it, but it's usually pretty regular. If you miss one, you're like, oh, what's happened? That's always the thing that makes people say, well, am I pregnant? Yes, ma'am.
So like right here in this picture, sorry.
It's okay.
this egg stays here, and you said like that's where it like waits to be like.
So we're talking about, she showed me this picture here.
Yeah.
So no, this is the uterine tube, right, that's going here. This is the fimbriae, these guys here. And this is the infundibulum, the little funnel, right? So when this egg is released, no, it's gonna then move up into that uterine tube. The fimbriae kind of draw it in and send it down that pathway towards the uterus. So, and this is a couple of days worth of journey to go from the ovary through that tube into the uterus. And again, that's that window where if the sperm is going to come and fertilize it, that's usually when it happens, is up in that tube.
So, back to the other picture.
Let me just erase these guys here. Back to this one.
Yeah. So the one that is in the tube that ends right about where.
Yeah, somewhere about here. Yeah. And again, that's when this endometrium is at its thickest, right? It's ready. This is when I'm ready to, if the egg and the sperm get together, it's going to implant there and start growing this baby. If nothing happens, if the egg's not fertilized, then this is where it starts flushing all that stuff out over that 3, 4, 5 day period. Other questions here? This would make a real nice kind of essay question, right? Short answer to tell me about this menstrual cycle, this reproductive cycle, and what hormones are involved and what's happening there.
Do you know why some people have like worse cramps than others? Some people actually
Right. I don't know entirely what's causing it. I would say it's differing levels of hormones and people's sensitivity to that. But I don't know for sure why I'm not sure anybody knows for sure why one person's response is different than another. Very similar with childbirth. Some people in that build up to being actually in labor, having the baby itself, some people just breeze right through it. Some people respond horribly to it. The same with pregnancy in general. We have had friends who were just sick the whole 9 months. Some who are on bed rest. And my wife just zipped right through it. She did great. Felt fantastic. She was just saying the other day, I wish that I could be pregnant again. We're not going to be. But, because she enjoyed it. She felt great. She had a great experience. Whereas other friends would say, no, I never want to be pregnant again in my entire life. So. But what causes those differences, I think it's the hormone levels in your response to them, but more than that, I can't tell you. Are you with me here, my friends? Questions? Okay. So let's see what we've not covered. Oh, female secondary sexual characteristics. Well, oops, not that one. Well, what happens? Remember we talked about the male secondary characteristics, which was the deepening of the voice, increased muscle mass, right? More hair. What did you say? They become the werewolf. I'm not sure that's exactly what count, but similar. So what are the female sexual characteristics? Secondary. Because, of course, primary means you start releasing these eggs, starting your period, right? Well, let's look. Go to your textbook. You could probably come up with them. They're here on page 522. The list is a little more narrow, though it's stuff that you're like, well, of course. This again, you ask yourself, what are we talking about when we talk about puberty? What happens at this point? Development of the breasts, right? They're always present, but changing. What else? Increased vascularization of the skin means just more blood flow. More blood to that area. And then what's the third one? Well, the second one that's on the list? The increased storage of this adipose tissue in these certain places. Okay? The point of this, of course, is to store energy so that if the woman is pregnant and for some reason is not getting enough food when they're pregnant, you have these stores, these reserves to feed the baby with, right? In actuality, what this does is it takes a girl's body and makes her look more like a woman, more curvy. Does this make sense? Because if you look at, a very young, let's say a 10-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl, not significant differences in their bodies, right? But you take an 18-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl and you compare them, okay, now there's significant differences, right? And again, most of that comes from these secondary sexual characteristics. And the primary hormones for females, progesterone and the estrogen. Those two that we were showed on the last diagram. What was the primary for the males? Testosterone. Again, there's 1,000 other ones that go through it, but these are our primaries. Okay. Erection, lubrication, orgasm in the female. We've talked about this as we've gone through, but we'll review those pieces. Where does erection happen in the female? In the clitoris. The labia, they do get larger. The vagina actually, when there's arousal, actually gets a little bit larger, lengthens a bit. It kind of opens like being prepared for intercourse, right? Whereas normally it's a fairly closed thing. Stay with me. Shh. Lubrication, we've already talked about. The fact that you have these glands in the vestibule and the outside genitalia that are lubricating the outside. Shh. The vagina itself does produce a significant amount of lubrication. Your textbook calls it mucus. You say, ew, is it like your snotty nose? Well, it's the same kind of fluid, but it's not snot. You with me? It's lubrication, right? Slightly different consistency, different purpose. Orgasm, of course, we've talked about that being just those muscles. The vagina is mostly muscle. It's got tissue on the inside, but it's mostly this smooth muscle. And it's these rhythmic contractions. The main point of that being what? Help pull that sperm up and in. You got it. That's the main point behind it. Sure. Was there a question that you all had?
Oh yeah, do we need to know the names of the schemes?
You do not. Nope, you do not. Just what's in these two diagrams. Okay. I'm rolling back to our list here. We have really only a couple of more things to talk about from the list. Well, let's talk about mammary glands since they're there. We talked about this being the secondary sexual characteristic with the females. The mammary glands, or the breasts. What's the point? Like, why do they have milk production, right? What? And again, the point of that milk is to provide nutrition to the baby. But does anyone know what else is passed through breast milk? Significant amounts of immune hormones. Immune system products. Basically, this baby who's starting out doesn't have any immune system. And so the mother, as it's feeding the baby, is passing along huge amounts of basically antibiotics. T cells and B cells and things that are going to attack all of the 1,000 new things coming at the baby. One of the things you'll see as you become a parent,
babies especially are always getting fevers. They'll spike, they'll get really high temperature, 102 for like a couple of hours, and then they're fine. Why? Because they're being exposed to all these organisms that you and I have been exposed to for 18 years. And here's this baby, this is his first time with the strep virus or with this certain kind of bacteria. Does that make sense? But these guys, I mean, if we all had immune systems like babies our whole lives, I think we'd never get sick. Because they're so impressive. That's why it's so important that you get your kids vaccinated. Because as a baby, as a child, these vaccines will help them fight these diseases later in life. And as a child, it's no problem. Chickenpox, right? You've all had your chickenpox virus or vaccine, I'm assuming. Chickenpox as a kid is no big deal. A couple of days, maybe a week or two, and you're back to normal. As an adult, chickenpox will kill you. Yeah. Yeah, sure. All these other pieces, you know? So, I haven't talked about vaccines too much with you guys, but I'm telling you, do your research. The people who say vaccines are not good for you, many times they're based upon one study that it came out that guy was a total crock. He made up all of his data. And still 20 years later, he was kicked out of he was from England, I think. He lost his medical license, you know what I mean? Get vaccinated. Be wise. Be wise. Yes?
Does that apply to cow's milk too?
Does it apply to cow's milk?
Immune system thing.
So if you're feeding the baby cow's milk?
So like, if a human drinks cow's milk, are they getting the nutrition?
Boy, that's a good question.
I feel like the cow milk that we drink is so...
Right, most of it is, yeah, it's significantly different than that. I think there is some of that, but I don't think it has the same, not nearly the same benefits. You can't feed cow's milk to a baby. You give formula. And they do their best to try and make that formula nutritious, but it's not nearly as good. Breastfeeding is by far the better way to go, as far as the baby's health. Sometimes you can't help, but sometimes the baby doesn't respond, or there's lots of different reasons why you wouldn't. But if all things being equal, breastfeeding 100 times better. Yeah. I'm just going to stop this because I want to make sure it's compiled before we're done. And then I'll get your question.